Welcome back to another episode of The Only Playbook. We are back. It has been a little bit of a hiatus, busy couple of weeks, but we are back. Week 10 is in the books. We are going to recap it all. I am Sweetheart. I got Shobit with me. Shobit, you got the dub, man. Tyreek Hill found the end zone. My God, how long? Since week 1, I think he had scored a touchdown. So, God, that must feel good. And that was, I mean, it wasn't like he had a great day, but that was just enough to get you the win.
I know, and it's so surprising. It's like they're in the 2-yard line, and you're like, oh, it's not probably going to be Tyreek Hill. Johnny Smith had that big run or big pass, and he went downfield, and I was like, oh, it's going to be a running play, hand off to Mostert or Achane, and sure enough, Tyreek Hill gets that touchdown, but didn't do anything else kind of the rest of the game. So we'll talk about Tyreek Hill a little bit more, but yeah, it's good to get a dub. My playoff chances are very slim to none. So we'll see what happens.
Hey, I'm right there with you. You and I are the bottom 3 right now out of 12 teams. So I quite frankly can't explain it. This is going to end up probably being one of those anomaly seasons where I just continue to look at my roster and be like, I don't know how I got here.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just the reality of fantasy football, man. I mean, sometimes the ball bounces your way, and a lot of times it doesn't. So let's talk all about it. Again, we want to recap certain things, but we're 1 week away from trade deadline in almost all fantasy football leagues, at least as far as I'm concerned that I'm in. So, I have a couple of guys that situations have changed as of the last couple of weeks. I want to know kind of where your head's at. They're big name players, whether you're trying to hold on to them, whether you're trying to trade them away before things could get worse, whether you still have some perspective or, a positive outlook that things could get better for them. So just want to kind of gauge where you're at. We can do a little bit of discussing, and then obviously waiver wires as they go through tonight. We'll round out the episode. So trade for or trade away, Shovitz. Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys, man. We know Dak Prescott's on the IR with the injury. This team frustrates me to my core because all year I've been waiting for this tide to turn, the ship to turn. They have such a favorable schedule for all players, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, yet it's one of the most dysfunctional offenses I've seen all year. They never seem to get it going. And the guy that's at the top of this food chain now is CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott's on the IR. There's a chance he could miss the rest of the season. They're already basically out of the playoffs, so there's real no concern or no, levity to them trying to rush him back. With that being said, you look at CeeDee Lamb this week, 6 catches for 21 yards, one of the worst performances he's had. Cooper Rush looked awful, just absolutely awful. The offense had no functionality. Now, I don't know if this is something that, is going to be 1 week or if it's going to be on a weekly basis, because Philly's pass defense is somebody you can typically throw against. They've got Houston, they've got Washington, they've got the Giants. It's not like it's not bad. It's a pretty okay schedule, but Cooper Rush is the problem. Are you trading for CeeDee Lamb, knowing that there's probably people like me that are freaking out looking to get whoever the hell they can for him? Or are you trading away CeeDee Lamb because if he has another week next week like this week, his trade value plummets, right? So then at that point, you're basically not going to be able to get anything for him. So CeeDee Lamb, a guy who, again, top 5 fantasy draft pick, where's your head at right now with the situation around Dallas?
Yeah, I know it's tough, but you have to kind of look at the positives. The positives is that he did have 6 receptions. He has 10 targets, so the targets are still there. And the matchups that he has coming up, Houston, Washington, Giants, and Cincinnati, those are all favorable matchups, right? So either the Cowboys are getting CeeDee Lamb's getting points in garbage time, or they're utilizing him throughout the game. I think he'll be the focal point of the offense still. So it's it's a tough situation to be in. But I think if you're a CeeDee Lamb owner, you have to hold because the matchups there are just too nice. And I don't know what trade you could do to get someone else. It's a very tough situation. I don't think anybody wants CeeDee Lamb at this point, knowing that Cooper Rush is the quarterback. But I think you have to hold and hope that the matchups kind of get you points either in garbage time or just through game script.
Yeah, you're right. It's the whole targets versus realization of points, right? I mean, we talk about this with players in the past. Not all targets are created equal. And we saw the atrocity of some of the passes from Cooper Rush this past weekend. But I'm with you in the sense that as a CeeDee Lamb owner, it's so hard right now where we're 4 weeks away from the playoffs, where this is really where you have to rack up wins to make sure you're in the playoffs, to try to trade away your my first round draft pick with the hopes that I could get something comparable to, actually fill that void. So it's a sticky situation to be in, but it's similar to the next guy that we want to talk about as well, Malik Nabers. And
Right.
CeeDee Lamb is falling into this situation because his quarterback's hurt. Malik Nabers, the fear coming into the season was exactly what's transpired the last 4 weeks, right? He's an uber talented receiver. He can get open. He's garnering targets still, but his quarterback play is so bad that it's, production, targets are going to be there, potentially yards could be there. He's going to have minimal touchdown opportunities. And now it seems like it's getting worse and worse with them, even just not being able to move the football with Daniel Jones. So similar situation with Malik Nabers, where he was at the top of, at the beginning of the season, the outlook that we had for the rest of the season. This was the one fear. We thought that fear went away with the fact that, they can really suck and still funnel all of the passing targets to Malik Nabers, but he's not like a massive receiver that you can, throw him 18 targets, especially if they're balls in the middle of the field where he's getting absolutely decked. He's already got some concussion concerns. So where are you at with Malik Nabers right now, knowing the state of the offense of the Giants and potentially the decrease in production, but the targets still being there, similar to CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very similar situation. I put Lamb a little bit higher because I think he's the focal, he'll get more better targets that can result, like touchdowns are more of a opportunity for CeeDee Lamb than I think with Malik Nabers. But you're right, it's very similar. 10 target last game, he had 10 targets, 6 receptions, and the matchup is also nice for Malik Nabers. Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Indiana, all good matchups to start Nabers. However, Daniel Jones, man, that he is so trash. Like, it's
so
incredible how inaccurate some of those throws are and how he just doesn't help his receivers by placing the ball where it needs to be in simple routine throws. And there's talks that Drew Luck may come in and become become the starting quarterback, and Daniel Jones might get benched, right? So I'm a little bit lower than I am with CeeDee Lamb. I think, if you can't trade him, you may want to, but I think it's a similar situation where you have to hold and hope that, again, targets and matchups lead you to some points.
Yeah, the saving grace in that situation is we know Drew Lock's kind of an aired out type quarterback, right? He's going to have interceptions. He's going to be risky with the football, but potentially could that mean that there is more upside for Nabers if Drew Lock does get the starting gig versus Daniel Jones? Because how much worse can it really get with targets that are absolutely uncatchable, right? I mean, we look at the box score and we see 10 targets, 9 targets, but when you contextualize the targets, like over half of them aren't even catchable. So it's just like, what are we really doing with that? So in the situation that I'm in, I think, again, similar to CeeDee Lamb, the problem for me becomes if I rest on my laurels, it's almost like I am accepting the fate of what the rest of the season is going to give me, right? Like whether they end up being bad, targets are there, production is not. I have to live with the fact that I'm starting those guys on a week-to-week basis. And the sad part is both of those guys are on the same team that I have right now. So it's not like I'm having a balancing act where I have some guys that are productive and some that are not. I have Nabers and Lamb stacked in the same team. So that becomes the issue. So it is kind of tragic, but like you said, what am I to do? Am I to trade them away for lesser known names that potentially have produced more? Like, randomly, like let's say I want to trade for Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney has been really, really productive, but he's not the household name that CeeDee Lamb or Malik Nabers is. So if you're given an option right now today, Shovit, you could trade Malik Nabers away and you can get Darnell Mooney. Would you do it?
I would trade Malik Nabers for Darnell Mooney. I think the upside for Mooney is a little bit higher. I like the offense, the way it's flowing. You're expected to get more touchdowns and more opportunities, and I think that the way your team is set up, you're setting up for targets for both, CeeDee Lamb and Malik Nabers as like the go-to. So if you could have a guy that can, get you some touchdowns and things, and there's some upside with Mooney as well. I don't have the stats with me right now, but there is certainly some good things coming his way, I feel like, towards the end of the season. So I actually would make that trade personally.
I would as well, but I did not think I would be here, 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago debating Malik Nabers versus Darnell Mooney. But so that's kind of the situation we're in. Yeah. And I think the theme of this segment is wide receivers that are in situations where do you pivot in or pivot out? Number 3 guy on this list, your boy, Tyreek Hill. I mean, we could argue that he is the biggest bust in fantasy football this year simply because CMC got hurt, right? CMC, you didn't have to force into your lineup and consistently just sit there and watch horrible production. Tyreek Hill, you cannot bench, so you have to start him every week, and you just had to watch shitty production after shitty production. And now with Tua back, it's still not quite there. The thing that I've seen is defenses are daring them, right? Defenses are keeping 2 safeties back, and they're saying, if you want to run it down our throats over and over again, if you want to dink and dunk your way down the field, you can. but we are not going to give you the stuff over the top that makes the Dolphins so dangerous with that speed. And without that right now, I mean, man, Mike McDaniel does not look like the same head coach. This team doesn't look like the same team. I mean, the roster's not different. They still have the two-headed running backs. They still have Waddle. They still have Hill. So it is kind of a weird situation there. But out of these three guys, you have Tyreek Hill. Where do you put Tyreek Hill in the pecking order between Nabers and Lamb? And what are you doing with Tyreek Hill present day?
Dude, I would sell him so fast because, like, here's the thing, right? There's just not enough throws downfield. The whole game, there was only one throw that was greater than 20 yards. Jeez. And when you have a speedster like Tyreek Hill, when you have Waddle, these guys, you should expect to be able to throw downfield and get you some points that way. You're not seeing that, and you're also seeing a lot of utilization of the tight end position. Like Jonnu Smith is getting his in this team more than Tyreek Hill is, right? So for me, I see that one touchdown and then I see 3-4 targets. I'm like, okay, there's that one touchdown to kind of bait someone else to get Tyreek Hill, and maybe I can trade him for someone else. I would do that in a heartbeat at this point. It's you're right. And the fact that you had to wait till week 11 to see the second, or week 10 to see the second touchdown for Tyreek Hill, dude, what are we doing? What are we doing here, man? It's atrocious.
It is so. I mean, that it's the thing that makes fantasy football so great, but also makes you want to pull your hair out.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a year removed from CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill just completely obliterating and dominating the NFL, and nothing really changed, right? I mean, yes, Tyreek had lost his quarterback for some time, but even with his quarterback now back, Dak and CeeDee Lamb, they've been connecting before Dak got hurt. Like, it's just not there. It's not the same. And it is really, really just interesting that the Dolphins still found a way to win despite the fact that they're not throwing the ball down the field. So that leads me to believe that if they can continue to become now this running offense that loves to check it down to Jonnu Smith 4 times a game, and they're going to win that way, then I mean, I don't know what's to stop them from not continuing to do that. And that doesn't bode well for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
What sucks is with a guy like that, you would think he should be getting screens. Why is he not getting screen passes? Why is he not getting like quick slants to where he can get some work done after the catch? I don't know, man. It's frustrating to watch. I mean, I think it'd be more frustrating for me if I was a Hill owner, but I am so frustrated, and I don't even own Hill. I don't have any Hill stock anywhere. And just watching this offense, I'm like, how are you not getting one of the guys that has been deemed the most unguardable player in football in like the last 5 years, the football more?
And part of it could be that Mike McDaniel is just protecting Tua, because like the longer the throws have to be, the more he's got to be in the pocket. So he's trying to protect him, not so that he doesn't get sacked. This season it will be interesting with how what they do and whether they make it to the playoffs or not. But maybe it's one of those two, just trying to get quick throws out so that they don't, so he's not getting sacked. So it may be a careful step, and we could see some more downfield throws next week, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, man. I hope so. Let's hope for a turnaround here the last 4 or 5 weeks. A guy that seems to want to turn it around, that now all of a sudden, after all these other names that we're talking about, I'm like, give me Calvin Ridley. Yeah. Calvin Ridley for the Tennessee Titans now all of a sudden has completely turned around. He's finding that he's catching the deep ball. He's getting touchdowns. Will Levis is throwing the ball his way. The last 3 weeks, I mean, I don't even have to look at the box scores. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's outproduced Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, and Malik Nabers. Yes. And that is crazy because this guy was a waiver wire player 4 weeks ago. He was dropped after like the first 5-6 weeks. So the cyclical season of fantasy football comes back and rear its ugly head. Where are you at with Calvin Ridley right now? Are you going out and trying to trade for this guy? Or if you own him and you've been reaping these crazy, just unwarranted benefits, are you trying to trade him away while his stock is insane?
I'd love to have Calvin Ridley on my team. Please, if I could, like, whoever wants to trade me Calvin Ridley, come on over.
If there's anybody out there that can hear you.
No, since Hopkins has been traded, right? 34% target share, 100 receiving yards per game, 20.4 fantasy points per game. And so as far as target shares, finished at wide receiver 1, 2, and 3, respectfully. So it's been. And the matchups are really nice for the Titans coming up. You got Minnesota, Houston, Washington, Jacksonville, Cincinnati. And so it's just everything is going the right way. And the concern was that they're not utilizing him until the fourth quarter, and he's just not getting his. Now that there's no Hopkins, he's the true wide receiver 1 on this team. So yeah, the outlook is great, especially heading into the fantasy playoffs for Calvin Ridley, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you have a great quarterback who is perfect for what you need. He's going to air it out. He's going to risk throwing deep balls, and that's what you want if you're the recipient of that which is Calvin Ridley has been. So we have Lamb, Nabers, Hill, and Calvin Ridley, and right now week 11 was it week 11 just wrapped up? No, week 10 just wrapped up.
10, yep.
and we would take Calvin Ridley out of all 4 of those wide receivers the rest of the season, man. What in the world is fantasy football? God, that's crazy. All right. So that's what I have for trade for and trade away. Surely, again, trade deadlines this week. So if you are resting on your laurels, hoping that your DJ Moore stock is going to turn around, you got to stop, man. You got to stop. You got to make moves now. Whether you're selling, at a less of a premium because you're desperate, you have to make moves if you don't have a chance to make the playoffs. Because again, after this week, you basically have no ability to trade. So go out there, see what you can get. If you're shopping these guys, don't be surprised if what you're expecting back isn't, what you thought you would be getting. But at this point, do you really have a choice? So tough decisions to make here. All right, Chubbit, waiver wire watch list this week. We have 4 teams on bye. We have the Cardinals, big fantasy implications. You got Kyler, you got Connor, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Trey McBride, all 4 players. You got the Bucks. Baker Mayfield's been a revelation. Rashad White and Bucky Irving splitting the backfield and still being good. Like both still being good. Other teams could only dream to have that kind of production from their running backs. You have obviously Cade Otton, who's emerged as like a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Yes. And then you have the Panthers who have, Chuba Hubbard and nobody else. And then the Giants with Tyrone Tracy and Malik Nabers. So there are quite a bit of players that are going to be on buys that you're going to be benching. So let's start with the quarterback position this week. I have a couple of guys that I like. Matchup wise, Jared Goff, man. Jared Goff coming off 5 interceptions this week and still winning the football game. Goodness gracious, man. Some teams could only dream to have stuff like that happen. But Jared Goff is taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. They are an absolute pass funnel. They're playing at home. Your only fear here is the Lions have shown how easily they can beat teams by simply just running down their throats. So you could have Goff have an incredibly efficient day, and you have Monty score 2 touchdowns and Gibbs score 2 touchdowns, and Goff's fantasy production is not great. But the matchup is so nice. It's indoors. You could do a lot worse than Jared Goff this week. Jameis Winston at the New Orleans Saints. Again, another team that you can typically throw the football against. They're coming off of a bye after a really bad week and a really bad performance. So I'm expecting them to turn it around. And then you have, man, my goodness. I didn't even know if I should be typing this on here. Russell Wilson is on a streamable option list. Yes. He is taking on the Baltimore Ravens, who, again, don't let the team fool you. Don't let that name fool you. Don't let that aura around the Baltimore Ravens fool you, man. This team, especially the pass defense, is one of the worst in the NFL. And I still can't quite understand why they are, but I feel like I've been waiting week after week after week for them to finally turn things around, and they're just not. So that's the only fear is at what point are they going to turn it around? And is it going to be Russell Wilson the reason that they turn it around? But, man, it's not pretty. You would know. You're watching all the Steelers games every snap. Like, the way the production is happening is not the prettiest, but it's still production. And, sometimes you don't need to watch 60 minutes of the football game. You can just look at the box score and look at your fantasy team and see the points there. So do you have any super concerns with Russell Wilson? I know he would probably be third on my list out of these 3 guys, but still not a terrible option considering the matchup.
No, I don't. I think, the connection with George Pickens is we're finally seeing that into fruition. And if you're going to go out and compete against Baltimore, who can score in a plethora of ways, like they can just put up points. Henry's there, Zay Flowers there, and Lamar Jackson is there. So they're going to have to put up points to be able to be competitive with Baltimore. So, I think this is a very good streamable option. Last week, Wilson had 3 touchdowns, right, against the Commanders, who've got, baby Lamar, right? So it's like a similar, not the same, but similar team. Commanders can also put up a lot of points. Baltimore I'm expecting them to on Sunday. So I think this is a good streamable option.
Any other quarterbacks that maybe desperate? Bo Nix is still out there. I feel like right now he should be rostered because he's been really good. So I think since week 6, he's QB6 on the season. So he's been pretty fantastic. But any other quarterbacks?
Maybe Justin Herbert, if he's available, playing against Cincinnati. I think he's also a player that needs to actually even be on your team at this point, I think.
Yeah, Cincinnati is a great passing matchup too. So you definitely want to try to take advantage of that. Running backs, number 1 on the list to me is Audric Estime for the Denver Broncos. This man is the lead back in Denver now all of a sudden. I mean, I think the writing's been on the wall. Sean Payton's been talking about Estime even when he hasn't been playing as much for weeks now. And Javonte Williams, the starting running back, got one carry, Shobit. One singular carry. So Audric Estime is clearly the lead back. The only thing you have to temper with your expectations is the guy does not see the field on 3rd down. So he is not catching any, if at all, very many passes at all. So strictly a first and second down running back, but they are a running offense. They love to, design the play action with Bo Nix off of the running offense. So I think there's definitely a safe floor with him. You might have to be touchdown dependent to see the, 14 to 16 point range. Otherwise, he's going to be hovering around that 8 to 10, possibly with the rushing upside. But I think he has to be, out of all the running backs on waivers this week, probably the number one priority.
Yeah, I would think so. And it's like, week 11, you're not really picking up running backs unless someone, player gets injured. There's not that many injuries that you have another guy available. So he's got to be the top of your, waiver picks for this week for sure, especially with 14 carries, I believe, last game. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Audric Estime. And then you have another guy who is also a known first and second down workhorse. Gus Edwards is back for the Chargers and kind of splitting, like not snaps, but carries. He's almost splitting with J.K. Dobbins already. We've seen J.K. Dobbins lose some steam after that amazing start to the season. We know what Gus Edwards is. Gus Edwards has been Gus Edwards even with other good running backs in the backfield, especially for the Ravens last year. So he always gets work, whether, we like it or not. He's not the sexiest fantasy player because, again, he's got limitations with pass catching. So if he's not finding the end zone, you're looking at like a, 12 carries, 50 yards, or 12 carries, 45 yards type day. But if you're like a Dobbins owner, or if you're desperate for running back, like you were just mentioning, Jalen Warren's your starter, Gus Edwards is going to get 10 to 12 carries because he plays on a team that loves to run the football. So another potential safe pickup for the rest of the season. And we know Dobbins has an injury history. So one injury, and then Gus Edwards becomes the focal point of that backfield. And then the last guy you just mentioned, he's your running back one, Jalen Warren. Jalen Warren is officially back, and it looks like he's finally healthy.
Yeah.
And I think he's got some flex upside, man. We've always appreciated Jalen Warren, the player on paper, on the field. He always looks like he sticks out more than Najee Harris. But I know that this offense, it's hard to want so many pieces of the pie of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, despite the fact that they're putting up right now 20, 30 points a week. Again, it's not pretty. I don't know where it's going to come from. Right now, the one constant to me is Pickens. Pickens has elevated himself into like a top 10 receiver. But again, for me, I wouldn't hate having Jalen Warren on my team to throw in the flex spot if it was like a bye week situation or something like that.
Yeah, he's still getting the attempts. He had like 14 rushing attempts. So it's like they use him well. The problem with this is like when you get into the red zone, it's probably going to be Najee Harris, and he's probably not going to see a touchdown that way. But Jalen Warren, he's an athletic player. He's got some crazy skills. So a screen pass, 15-yard play can get you a touchdown. So that gives him a flex upside for sure.
Yep. All right, wide receivers. We have Quentin Johnston. He continues to be on the waivers. Back-to-back weeks with the touchdowns. Not like he was an incredibly productive player this past week, but they're still going to need to throw the ball somewhere. Ladd McConkey's there still. So, deeper leagues, Quentin Johnston trying to make himself a little bit relevant. Ricky Pearsall, another guy that, immediately after the injury, after getting shot, comes back and is very productive. What we've seen for the San Francisco 49ers is Brandon Ayuk has left. Juwan Jennings is now Brandon Ayuk, and Ricky Pearsall is now Juwan Jennings. So we found a way to basically funnel these receivers in and have them plug and play and still be incredibly effective. Ricky Pearsall is probably not a guy that you're going to be comfortable starting every single week because, they have Debo, they have CMC, they have Kittle. So, there are often times where he's probably going to be the odd man out. But again, he's a productive player. He's a first-round receiver. So I just feel like they're going to start to use him more. And he definitely has the upside to have some boom weeks. So not the worst guy to also roster on the back of your roster. And again, if Juwan Jennings gets hurt or Debo gets hurt, all of a sudden Pearsall is a automatic must-start player. So what do you got? You got anybody?
No, on that note, I think Juwan Jennings could be a waiver pick as well. I don't know if he's on. What's the percentage of rosters that he's on? But I think he's been injured and he's coming back now. So I think with him coming back, we'll see how it works out with Ricky Pearsall. But Juwan Jennings should be on your radar. And if you maybe not waiver pick, but certainly a day two pickup.
Yeah, I mean he's right now 68% rostered, right? I mean, when he's playing quite a bit. This past week, 91% of the snaps, 11 targets, 7 for 93. I mean, you take that. I mean, we just sat here and talked about Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, and Malik Nabers, and we would love for them to produce like Juwan Jennings is. So right now, if I had the option, I would trade for Juwan Jennings and I would go out and get him and start him because right now he is legitimately playing the Brandon Ayuk role, and they're in an offense that The 49ers are vying to get back into the playoff race. Obviously, they're a team that has championship aspirations. So there's going to be no real slowing down of this team. CMC is finally getting back into the fold. So I want stock for the 49ers heading into the latter part of the season because I feel like there's going to be fantasy points to be had. And then last guy, man, Adonai Mitchell, no Michael Pittman Jr. this past week, and we saw Adonai Mitchell finally burst onto the scene. 94% of the snaps played, 6 catches, 71 yards. He's a talented player. I came into the season saying that I liked him better than Xavier Worthy out of Texas. He can do more as a receiver, but this all hinges on Michael Pittman Jr.'s injury, right? I would love a world where they start to slowly bring this guy up to speed. But I don't know who is going to be the odd man out. It's going to be Alec Pierce. It's going to be Josh Downs. It can't be Pittman. So that's why the order of chain of commands there makes it seem like AD Mitchell, while everybody's healthy, is going to have a hard time scratching into enough playing time to warrant getting any sort of a start. But he's a talented player. And here's my other kind of factor with this is if they lose this week, they're most likely out of the playoffs, right? And typically teams that are out of the playoffs, what do they want to do? They want to start to showcase their young players. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a twofold situation, so stay with me on this. Adonai Mitchell could burst onto the scene as somebody that they want to see get more snaps. But could that come with the possibility that they're like, okay, Flacco, we're not going to make the playoffs. You're back on the bench. We're bringing Anthony Richardson back because we need him to progress. That actually is going to hurt you if you have Adonai Mitchell, most likely. So it's kind of a weird situation to be in. But I do think we've seen past the history is that rookie receivers, second half of the season, whether it's they're finally learning the playbook, they're finally up to speed on the NFL speed, or their team is out of it and they need to see some run to see if this guy's really got what it takes. And I think that's where Adonai Mitchell could come on for the latter half of the season and provide some value. Tight end, shove it. Mike Gesicki, when T. Higgins doesn't play, is like a must-start fantasy football player. It's incredible the amount of targets that this guy warrants. We've talked about the tight end position. It's slowly started to taper off to where we've seen some stability with some of the good players. So you're not necessarily having to throw in randos every week like we were in the past. But Gesicki's a guy that's not a rando right now. He's a focal point of this offense. He sees quite a bit of targets. And if T. Higgins, who, man, is there a more injury-prone guy than T. Higgins right now in the NFL? I just can't quite think of one. If T. Higgins does not play, I think Mike Gesicki has to be a must-start in your roster, in your fantasy lineups. And then we have Dalton Kincaid, who got injured, and that injury looks relatively serious. Keon Coleman is still hurt for the Bills. Enter a la Dawson Knox, who's been there for a while now. He's reliable. We've seen him have some chemistry with Josh Allen in the past. If Kincaid is out for an extended time, you still don't have Keon Coleman. Somebody's going to have to catch the ball, and I think Dawson Knox enters the fold and makes himself a little bit relevant there. And then the last guy, or go ahead. Did you have something you want to add to that?
No, that's solid. The one thing to know when it comes to injuries is Sam Laporta is also day to day as well, so makes these tight ends a lot more valuable this week.
Yeah, if Sam Laporta is actually out, Brock Wright could insert himself into that lineup and be viable because they like to use their tight ends. So another guy to think of. And then the last guy, we talked about him at the hindrance of the number 1 draft pick, Tyreek Hill. Jonnu Smith has now become very, very relevant in fantasy football. You look at a guy who constantly seems to be getting the underneath targets. 4 targets this past week, but he had 6, 7, 8 over the last 4 weeks. So the consistency is there. He's only had 1 touchdown over that span. So, there's not a tremendous amount of upside, but he is a athletic tight end. He's much more athletic than the average tight end. We saw the catch he made and ran it for 30 yards. He's fast. He's really fast for a tight end. So he's got that burst. He kind of fits the Dolphins mold perfectly as a fast player on their team. So somebody that if you're really, really desperate is a not so bad dart throw at the tight end position. That is what I had, man. Do you have any other players that maybe we did not discuss?
No, I think that's solid. Week 11, this is what you get, right? So it's tough, but Audric Esteem, I think it should be the top of the list there. And then I would put maybe Ricky Pearsall and Jonnu Smith after that. I think.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this is 4 teams are on bye next week, week 12. And I know, again, sometimes waiver wire weeks, or you look at the waiver wire and you're like, I don't really need to pick anybody up. It's easy to just think 1 week further, right? Week 12, there are 6 teams on bye. It is the bye apocalypse. So if you feel like you don't have to make any moves this week and you're resting on your laurels, just skip ahead to week 12, see what players are on bye, and try to adjust. Because again, there's only four weeks left in the regular season. So if you're vying for the playoffs, you pretty much need to win almost every week possible. So it's getting a little slim pickings here, man. Wins are hard to come by. So you got to rack them up when you can. But that is all we have for you today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're watching, hit the like, hit the subscribe. If you're listening, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I am Sweetcard. That is my Twitter, and that is Shovit, and that is his Twitter. We are the only playbook. Good luck in week 11. Make some trades, man. Change up your team, man. Enjoy the last half of the season. If you've been a shitty team, trade some players away. Like, have some fun with it. Don't throw in the towel because you never know what could happen. So we are the only playbook. Again, see you guys.